Have you ever heard of an entire town being packaged and sold? Have you ever seen a place once crowded with workers turn into a deliberate empty space? Today, we are diving into the top 10 largest and most fascinating abandoned places in America. Not to chase cheap chills, but to face the darker side of fast money dreams. From mining boomtowns clinging to mountain slopes to post-industrial zones drained of their daily pulse, every location reveals the same truth. A community can disappear quickly when its core lifeline is cut. Some places still have a full main street as if people left only yesterday. Others are now peaceful parks built on top of massive environmental crises. Watch until the end, because number 1 lands on one of the biggest questions of modern times. Number 10, Jerome, Arizona. Jerome looks like a travel postcard that forgot to tell the truth. The town hangs on Cleopatra Hill as if gravity made an exception just this once. Houses stack along the slope, rooftops stepping down toward Verde Valley, and from a distance it feels almost romantic. Then you get closer and the mood changes. You do not feel like you arrived in a cute mountain town. You feel like you walked into a place that is still negotiating with its own past. In the 1920s, Jerome was huge by mining standards, often recorded at more than 15,000 residents, powered by major copper operations tied to United Verde and the wider UVX world. This was not a side note town. It was an economic engine with dust on its boots and metal in its lungs. Money came fast, workers came faster, and the town learned to live at full volume. That is where the nickname wickedest town in the West came from. Not from one scandal, not from one headline, but from an atmosphere. Saloons stayed loud, gambling stayed active, brothels became part of the night economy, and social friction ran hotter than what most settled communities could absorb. It was wealthy, yes, but it was a one-legged table pretending it had 4 legs. Then copper demand and mine life shifted, and after the shutdown era around 1953, Jerome fell hard. Buildings were torn down, others were left to weather and gravity, maintenance lagged, and
Harsh auto park conditions, including the major snow event of 1967, deepened the feeling of collapse. Here's what makes Jerome unforgettable now. It did not vanish, it changed shape. Walk the core today, and you see old brick fronts, Western-era facades, vintage signs, galleries, coffee shops, and small stores living inside the bones of a former copper empire. The Jerome Historic District, recognized as a national historic landmark district with a core around 120 acres, still reads like an open archive of boom and decline. So what is Jerome in 2026?
a comeback story, a cautionary tale, a living ghost town, maybe all 3 at once. If one community can rise so high on one industry and then lose its center so quickly, what should every modern town ask itself before calling growth a guaranteed future? Number 9. Scenic, South Dakota. You almost never see a whole town marketed like a starter home, yet Scenic once hit the market for the kind of price that would barely buy a decent apartment in a big city. That is the first strange thing about this place. The second is quieter. Scenic did not collapse in one dramatic night. It faded in broad daylight, mile by mile, car by car, paycheck by paycheck, until silence became the loudest thing on Main Street. Scenic sits out in Pennington County near the Badlands Corridor, where Highway 44 cuts through Long Wind and Long Memory. It was built to serve movement. Travelers needed fuel, mail, a drink, a quick stop before the next stretch of prairie. Towns like this survive on flow, so what happens when the flow changes direction? What happens when people stop needing your exit? That is where Scenic becomes less of a map point and more of a warning label. In the early modern era, the local economy softened, ownership concentrated, and by 2011, the core of town was packaged almost like inventory. Land, buildings, identity, all bundled. Post office, saloon, dance hall, bunkhouse, store, depot. Imagine that for a second. A community listed like a property portfolio. No firestorm, no battlefield, no cinematic final scene, just paperwork. And yet this is why Scenic matters. It is not the biggest ghost story by population, It is one of the biggest by symbolism. You can stand there today and still read what each building used to do, like labels left on jars after the shelves went empty. The structures do not scream ruin, they whisper interruption. The road is still there, the sky is still huge, the wind still clocks in on time. The crowd does not. If Jerome feels like a haunted theater with the lights dimmed, Scenic feels like a gas station clock frozen. Still hanging, still visible, just no one checking the time anymore. So here is the uncomfortable question. If your town depends on passing traffic, outside money, and yesterday's route map, are you building a community or renting one from the future? Scenic leaves you with that thought, then lets the prairie answer in complete silence. Number 8, Mogollon, New Mexico. Some towns die in one dramatic headline. Mogollon did something slower and honestly more unsettling. It wore down layer by layer inside a canyon that feels almost cut off from the rest of the world. You do not arrive here by accident, you commit to it. The road curls through Silver Creek Canyon like a test of patience, with long stretches of rock and forest that make you wonder if your map is joking. Before you see a single old building, you already feel the first truth of Mogollon. Isolation is not background, it is the main character. Mogollon began in the late 19th century, around the 1880s, as a gold and silver mining settlement in the Mogollon Mountains. At its peak, local history sources often place it near 5,000 residents, mostly miners and families living close to the grind of the shafts. More than 20 mines once operated in the district, and in the early 20th century, the gold and silver output was large by state standards. This was not a decorative mountain village. It was a hard-working machine built into steep terrain, where homes hugged slopes, space stayed tight, and every structure looked like it had to negotiate with gravity before sunrise. People once called it one of the wildest mining towns in the West. That label makes sense when you picture the ingredients: harsh labor cycles, short careers, isolation, social pressure, and conflict running hotter than a stable town could absorb. But here is what makes Mogollon linger in your mind. It did not collapse from one grand disaster that can fit into a single sentence. It eroded through a repeating pattern: major fires, flash floods, declining ore, then mine closures. Again and again. Not a cinematic explosion, a long subtraction. Walk through the old core now and the feeling is strangely intimate. Many structures still keep their original shape, yet the surfaces are sun-faded and wind-worn, as if time kept the skeleton and took the pulse. It is not full ruin. It is not full recovery. It is a seasonal heartbeat. People visit. A few buildings get care, but the place still carries the weight of what it used to be. Noisy, crowded, purposeful. If a community can lose momentum not in one blow, but through a chain of small retreats in resource, infrastructure, and people, what does that say about places today that still believe one industry will always save them? Number 7. Garnet, Montana. Some ghost towns look like wreckage. Garnet looks like a town that stepped out for coffee and never came back. You drive in expecting dramatic ruins, but the first punch is stranger than that. Storefronts still line up, old cabins still hold their shape, a hotel frame still stands there like it is waiting for a late check-in. So what happened here? Gold happened, then the end of gold happened. In the late 1890s, this mountain camp swelled fast, with roughly 1,000 people chasing ore and a better life. And then the crowd thinned almost as quickly when the easy money dried up. You can almost hear the town learning the oldest American lesson: one industry feeds you, then one industry leaves you hungry. The road in does half the storytelling before the buildings even appear. 12 miles of backcountry climb, about 2,000 feet up. At every mile feels like signal bars dropping out of your nervous system. By the time Garnet finally shows itself, your city brain has already gone quiet. Then comes the eerie part. This place is not flattened. It is preserved. About 30 historic buildings still read like a full sentence, not a broken word. A saloon, a store, miners' cabins, the shape of a real main street, not just a postcard fragment. Why does that hit harder? Because rubble lets you move on. Structure makes you imagine names, paychecks, arguments, birthdays, rent due on Monday. And Garnet did not vanish in one cinematic blast. It faded in layers, mind slow down, people leaving, a major fire in 1912, then long stretches of near emptiness by the First World War era, with the last store eventually closing in 1947. That timeline matters. It feels less like myth and more like modern anxiety in old wood. How many places today are one paycheck sector away from the same silence? Garnet is not just a ghost town. It is a pause town. It proves a community can disappear while its social blueprint stays on the table, clear enough for us to read and uncomfortable enough to feel personal. Number 6, St. Elmo, Colorado. If America had a museum for unfinished dreams, St. Elmo would be the front desk clerk, still standing, still polite, still quietly judging your life choices. You drive into Chalk Creek Canyon, climb higher and higher, and suddenly the air feels thinner than your weekend excuses. At roughly 10,000 feet, this place does not greet you like a town. It greets you like a memory that forgot to leave. The wooden facades line up on Main Street like old actors waiting for one more scene, and the mountains behind them look like they signed a contract to keep every secret forever. Back in the boom years, people did not come here for peace and pine-scented postcards. They came for gold, silver, speed, and the kind of ambition that burns hot and burns out fast. By its peak era, the town had close to 2,000 residents and the full small city package for that time. Telegraph links, a general store, hotels, saloons, a school, local papers, and all the daily noise that makes a place feel alive. So here is the obvious question. How can a town have everything and still lose everything? Easy answer. When one industry is your heartbeat, one downturn is your cardiac arrest. Mining slowed, money thinned out. Then the rail service ended in 1922, and that was the infrastructure gut punch nobody could ignore. What makes St. Elmo different is not just decline, it is the way decline froze instead of collapsing. Many old mining settlements became piles of splinters and foundations. St. Elmo stayed legible. You can still read it like a street map of the late 19th century. Commercial strip here, homes there, social life in between. That preserved look is why the district earned historic recognition and why people call it one of the best preserved ghost towns in Colorado. It is still visited, especially in warmer months, so this is not a dead void. It is stranger than that. It is a place where the body survived, but the original pulse never came back. And the climate does not let anyone forget. Long cold seasons, repeated freeze and thaw, mountain wind, sharp day, night temperature swings, all of it works like a patient sculptor with bad intentions. Paint peels, wood cracks, metal ages in plain sight. Nothing here explodes into ruin. Everything here slowly admits the truth. St. Elmo is not scary because it is loud. It is unforgettable because it is quiet enough for you to hear what prosperity sounds like after it leaves. So let me ask you this, if a town can keep its buildings but lose its reason to exist, what exactly makes a place alive? The people, the paychecks, or the stories we are still willing to tell? Number 5, Terlingua, Texas. Some towns got rich from metal, Terlingua got rich twice. First from quicksilver, now from silence. That is the strange magic here. You drive into the Chihuahuan Desert and the land looks like it has been edited by wind for 1,000 years. Dry ridges, open sky, stone ruins that still look stubborn. At first glance, Terlingua feels like the end of a road trip. After one night, it feels like the beginning of a confession. Terlingua rose in the late 19th century when Cinnabar drew miners into southwestern Brewster County near the Rio Grande and the Big Bend region. Money moved in fast. Workers moved in faster. For a while, this was not a side camp. It was a real mining community with weight. Historical records around the district describe thousands of residents in and around the area by the early boom years, and the Terlingua Quicksilver Belt became nationally important. If Wall Street had a desert cousin, this was it. Loud opportunity, short patience, long dust. Then the old script arrived. Ore declines. Industry thins out. A place built for extraction loses the engine that created it. So what is Terlingua now? Dead town or live town? The honest answer is both. By daylight, you see the bones of the mining era and feel the desert pressing on every wall. By evening, you see porch lights, bars, small kitchens, travelers, artists, river guides, and people trading stories like currency. This is not a museum under glass. This is a living ghost town, still breathing, just not with its original lungs. And there is real traffic behind that survival. Big Bend visitor flows feed gateway communities with spending on rooms, food, fuel, tours, and local services. Terlingua sits right in that ecosystem, close enough to catch the pulse every season. Then comes the annual emotional flashpoint, the famous Chili Championship tradition tied to Terlingua since 1967. For a few days, the desert flips the switch. Music rises, pots, steam, firelight dances on old stone. The same place that feels empty on a quiet morning can feel like a folk carnival by night. Terlingua proves a town can lose its industrial job title and still keep its cultural soul on payroll. The mine stopped being the center of gravity. Memory took over, and maybe that is the most American ending of all. A place dies on paper, then survives in story, ritual, and people stubborn enough to stay. Number 4, Vulture City, Arizona. Some towns are abandoned. Vulture City feels paused. The desert sun does not hide anything here. It exposes everything. Wood turns pale. Metal loses its shine. Walls crack like old promises. You walk in expecting ruins, but what you actually get is a full skeleton of a mining town that still knows exactly what each room used to do. It is beautiful in a Wild West postcard way, then quietly unsettling the longer you stay. You start asking yourself a simple question. Was this place built for people or built for gold with people attached? The story starts in 1863 when Henry Wickenburg discovered the Vulture mine and a boomtown rose around it. For decades, this was one of the heavy engines of Arizona mining. Historical records commonly cite around 340,000 ounces of gold and 260,000 ounces of silver between 1863 and 1942, with period value often described around $10 million. That money did not just create a camp, it created a working desert town. At peak, commonly cited numbers put the population near 5,000, which was massive for this kind of frontier mining community. And yes, Vulture City carried the full social package of boom town life. Assay operations, boarding areas, eating halls, saloons, brothel spaces, trading activity. Ambition ran hot. Rules ran thin. Violence lived close to daily routine. The best-known symbol is the hanging tree. The legend says 18 men were executed there over gold-related crimes. Some sources embrace the story, while other historians argue many details were later exaggerated. That tension is exactly the point. Vulture City is not only about ghost mood, it is also about memory, myth, and the social price of fast money in a light landscape. Today, the site is privately operated as a heritage attraction, with tours and seasonal events. So this is not dead silence in a sealed museum. It is a place where visitors still move through a preserved industrial ecosystem. You can read the layout almost like a blueprint of a vanished economy. Walk from the assay office zone toward worker quarters and gathering spaces, and you feel the same paradox again and again. In daylight, it looks cinematic. In detail, it feels heavy. Vulture City proves a town can stop producing ore and still produce meaning. Number 3, Times Beach, Missouri. You rarely watch a town disappear twice, first as a place to live, then as a memory with street names. Times Beach sat in St. Louis County on the Merrimack floodplain, and that geography felt manageable until it did not. People had homes, schools, routines, and small businesses, ordinary mornings, familiar roads. Then contamination and floodwater arrived in the same chapter, and normal life became a liability. Most ghost towns in this countdown lose jobs, lose people, and slowly run dry. Times Beach followed a harsher script. Dioxin contamination spread through a town already vulnerable to flood events, and the public health response concluded residents should not move back in. More than 2,000 people were told to relocate permanently. Think about that for 1 second. Not move for a better salary, not move for warmer weather, move because your hometown has been medically disqualified from existing. The money side makes it even stranger. In early 1983, federal officials announced relocation funding of $33.1 million, with Missouri covering a 10% share. The combined package lands in the mid-30 million range, roughly $37 million for one town buyout. Houses, shops, and local history were converted into appraisals, legal files, and signatures. America usually sells property by the room. Times Beach was handled almost like a complete civic inventory. Then came the long cleanup era. A temporary incinerator treated more than 265,000 tons of dioxin-contaminated material from multiple Missouri sites, including contaminated material from Times Beach itself. Cleanup was completed in 1997. After that, the land was transferred for public use, and the former town site returned as Route 66 State Park. Today, people hike, cycle, picnic, and enjoy river views on ground that once carried evacuation orders. So what is Times Beach now? A park? Yes. A warning? Absolutely. It is one of the rare American places where the most haunting thing is not a ruined main street. The most haunting thing is official absence. No dramatic final showdown, no single last night, just policy decisions, environmental risk, demolition, remediation, and a calm green landscape that looks peaceful until you learn what stood there before. If a town can be erased and renamed within one generation, what should we call safety the day before the warning arrives? Number 2, Kennecott, Alaska. Some places go quiet because people leave. Kennecott went quiet like someone cut power to a giant machine in the middle of a sentence. You stand there between glacier ice and hard mountain walls, and the first thing your brain says is this cannot be real scale. A massive red wooden mill rises out of a frozen valley like a factory from another planet. No neon signs, no traffic noise, just thin, cold air and the sound of your own steps, trying not to echo too loudly. Kennecott was not built as a cute frontier town. It was an industrial command center for copper, designed in the early 20th century to do one thing at extreme intensity. To make that possible in a place this remote, builders pushed a railroad about 196 miles from Cordova with a cost around $25 million in that era. Think about that gamble. If your supply chain begins with cliffs, glaciers, and winter, you are not opening a small business. You are declaring war on distance, and the gamble paid. From 1909 to 1938, the Kennecott system produced more than 4.6 million tons of ore, containing about 1.183 billion pounds of copper. Gross revenue moved past $200 million, with net profit above $100 million. That is not a local success story. That is global industrial gravity wearing a parka. Walk the site now and the proportions still feel shocking. More than 76 structures once supported the operation, housing, power generation, workshops, offices, and the famous 14-story concentration mill that still dominates every camera frame. This is why Kennecott feels different from a classic Western ghost town. It is not about one main street and a few storefront memories. It feels like a full production organism that lost its heartbeat in one long winter and never restarted. Its afterlife matters too. The district entered the National Register in 1978, gained National Historic Landmark recognition in 1986, and in 1998, the National Park Service took stewardship of most key historic assets. So yes, the town stopped producing copper, but it never stopped producing meaning. Kennecott proves something uncomfortable and beautiful at the same time. A community can reach impossible industrial scale in one of the harshest landscapes on Earth, then become memory the moment the ore cycle ends. What survives after that is not the payroll. It is the silhouette, the infrastructure, and the human audacity, still frozen into wood, steel, and mountain light. Number 1. Picher, Oklahoma. Some towns die when money leaves. Picher died from the very thing that once made it rich. If that sounds unfair, that is because it is. Picher sat in Ottawa County inside the old tri-state mining belt, where Oklahoma, Kansas, and Missouri meet, and for a long stretch of American industrial history, this place was a machine. Lead and zinc came out fast, rail cars moved hard, paychecks kept lights on, and by 1926 the town reached around 14,000 residents. For a mining community in that region, that was not small town energy, that was full volume. So what changed? One short answer. Time, one honest answer. Cost. Decades of extraction left behind, waste piles, contaminated soil, and a public health burden that did not stay politely underground. The chat mounds became the skyline. Lead-related risk became part of family life. Dioxin and mine waste turned ordinary routines into exposure questions no parent wants to ask. Can kids play outside? Is this dust just dust? Is home still home if the ground itself is the problem? This is where Picher breaks away from the classic ghost town story. Most boom towns fade because ore runs out and jobs move on. Picher faced a harder ending. Federal and state programs moved into large-scale buyout and relocation, not because the town lost charm, but because living there at scale was judged unsafe. Read that again in plain English. People did not simply drift away. People were moved away. Then came another layer of loss. On May 10, 2008, an EF4 tornado tore through an already fragile community and deepened damage that had been accumulating for years. At that point, recovery was not just difficult, recovery was structurally out of reach. What remains today does not look like a romantic Western ghost street. It looks like deliberate absence. Empty pads where homes stood, old road lines that lead to nowhere in particular, scattered remnants of buildings in a landscape marked by mining afterlife. One frame is enough to know where you are. Picher is not picturesque ruin. It is industrial memory with no filter. Picher is the hardest number on this list for one reason. It shows that growth without environmental accountability can mortgage a community to the future and then hand the bill to children who never signed the deal. If prosperity is real, only while the machines are running, what exactly are we building when the machines stop? All after exploring the 10 largest and most fascinating abandoned places in America, what stays with us is not just the weathered buildings or the eerie silence, but a simple truth. A town can disappear, yet its story rarely does. Every place we visited reflects ambition, mistakes, resilience, and sometimes reinvention. Some faded when the economy shifted. Some collapsed under environmental damage. Others were worn down layer by time and isolation. Together, they remind us that history does not live only in books. It is still written on the ground beneath our feet. Now I want to hear from you. Which location haunted you the most, and which one would you actually visit if you had the chance? Share your thoughts in the comments so we can go deeper in the next episode. If you enjoyed this series, subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss what comes next.